Is your time. Next up, we have Mr. Genuis. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on the issue of Indigenous procurement. Dalian's identity as an Indigenous company as part of the set-aside for Indigenous procurement is obviously absurd and a manipulation of the intention of the policy. The intention of the policy, presumably, is to give opportunities to Indigenous Canadians to be able to work in jobs that flow from government procurement. But this was a company that simply received contracts and subcontracted them, taking a cut along the way. There were no opportunities created for Indigenous people as a result of this. You mentioned a registry or a list of Indigenous companies that are used when considering this 5% set-aside. What percentage of those companies actually create jobs for Indigenous peoples in Canada?
Thank you very much for the question. I actually don't have that information. I will refer the question to Indigenous Services Canada. There's about 2,600 companies on that list in various commodity areas.
Okay, I think we need to get further information at this committee or elsewhere about to what extent those companies should really qualify in terms of the actual objective of the policy, creating opportunities for Indigenous Canadians. Ms. Reza, I want to ask you about staff augmentation. You spoke at the Government Operations Committee about this. You said, quote, traditionally staff augmentation works in a similar manner where you bring in a temp agency and they're taking on the burden of finding the resources. There are many shops that do this across the system, so there are about 635 IT firms that provide staff augmentation resources. So Canadians have become familiar with 3 companies, Coradix, Dalian and GC Strategies, that receive work and subcontract, often without providing any actual value themselves. But this is an incredible number. We're not just talking about 3 companies, 635 companies. So why is this practice of multi-level subcontracting so common that there are 635 different companies that are doing it?
Thank you very much for the question. First off, there's 635 companies that provide task-based IT professional services. So in terms of why there's so many, I mean, the Government of Canada has various priorities that need to be filled by niche skill sets on IT professionals. In terms of your question about
sorry, but just to clarify, these are folks doing staff augmentation, which you defined before the Government Operations Committee, not as doing the actual IT work, but as doing the work of finding people who can do the work. So why can't the Government of Canada just kind of maintain a database of external resources who have this expertise instead of going to 635 different companies to act as middlemen? Why can't they just keep a registry of those who are capable of doing the work to perform specific tasks?
Right. Thank you very much for the question. I think I received a similar question recently, and I think that the traditional model, if you permit, is like having a general contractor when you need to find somebody with a specific, an electrician or a certified plumber. So now what is being proposed is that we don't use that skill set that has been very helpful for us in the past to find the resources when we need to bring them in, regardless of whether it's IT or other staff augmentation, and to have a data set where we can type in and say, well, we need 5 IT engineers or 5 computer science graduates. And we're taking that on. We're looking at various elements, and I believe that we actually have a module that is a potential for us to be able to do that. But again, it's going to require a lot of administration now.
Well, just to clarify the question, though, I mean, I think the idea of having someone who has a general contracting function who oversees the process of finding those external resources necessary. I mean, someone needs to be in charge of the project, but I just don't understand why that general contracting function can't be a public servant. Why there can't be someone inside of government who has that skill set of knowing where these different resources are and being able to consult the appropriate database. And I do want to ask you specifically, how many of these 635 middlemen companies have 2 employees or less?
Thank you very much. I believe that is an outstanding question that we're working on. The list is publicly available, all the companies that are on it, but we're trying to work to provide the breakdown. Some of them are very large companies that are well known. Some of them are very small, as we've indicated.
Okay, so just to clarify, you are in the process of providing to this committee the details of how many employees each of those 635 companies have, and when can we expect that information?
I'm not sure if it's for this committee or OGO, and I know that we're looking at it. I'm just looking over here. Do we have further information?
I don't think we have further information to share right now. We'll just be
Okay,
careful.
just to clarify, we would like that information at this committee as well. And if you can provide that, please. Do you agree to do that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, you finish your response, though?
No,
please?
that's fine. I just wanted to say also we have to be careful not to paint all suppliers with the same brush. Of these three companies, some of them are.
But they're all doing that
Ms.
staff
Genuis,
augmentation
Ms.
work of
Genuis,
subcontracting.
Your time is up, Mr. Laporte. Would you, if you'd like to finish your answer briefly, because time is elapsed. Go ahead.
Say that we have three companies that have been under the radar. We have to be careful because we have legit suppliers that provide truly value added to the government of Canada. So I would be careful before we have the evidence that basically it's systemic, that we don't paint all these suppliers with the same brush. I think we just have to be mindful.
Thank you
of that.
very much. Going now to MP Barrett. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks very much. I want to pick up where we were before. 635, what was the term that you used for them, Deputy Minister?
Companies, they're the professional services providers, TBIP.
Professional services providers. Okay. So these 635 companies are not executing on the actual work, as you detailed in the questions from my colleague. They're middlemen. So they're middlemen. They're not executing on it. They're just finding resources and providing them. The Auditor General found that one of them, GC Strategies, wrote an RFP for the government, effectively to the exclusion of anyone else, but their own company. Is that common practice?
No, it is not.
How many other occurrences of that are there in the Government of Canada?
Thank you for the question. First, when we saw this in the AG's report, we also immediately picked up the phone to talk to the Auditor General because we were obviously unaware. We have since referred the matter to the RCMP as well. I know that seems to be the door that goes to, but we take these matters very seriously. When bid material is being prepared, as was discussed yesterday in the committee, there's an attestation that says, have you been involved in this? Because it precludes you from bidding on the work. So there's a lot of bells and whistles that are required. And in terms of your exact question, I'm going to ask Catherine, who has a responsibility in security, to advise us if you have any information on data.
So I'd like to offer a precision on my question before you respond. 635 companies. The Auditor General looked at one program and found one of the contractors was doing this. How many other companies do you suspect have engaged in this, and are you certain that there are no other occurrences of these middlemen writing their own contracts?
Thank you very much for the question. We can't be certain. What we do is we spend time looking at fraud, detection, data mining, and constantly auditing the various elements of it. Catherine?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairperson. So we do have a preventative and detection and early response framework to certain allegations that are brought before us. So as soon as there is an allegation, we look closely to see if there is documentation to support the allegation. Then we conduct an analysis to determine if there's evidence to substantiate the allegations. Now, if we arrive at that stage, we then refer the file to the internal investigative branch of the department so that they can move forward with the formal investigation of those allegations that have been laid. If we find criminal intent or action, we refer this file on to the RCMP.
Thank you very much. I will circle back to that, but I just want to revisit with you, Deputy Minister. So you've said specifically with respect to this issue on the request for proposal being authored by the bid winners, GC Strategies, that matter was referred to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police? So, Chair, her mic didn't turn on.
Would you repeat that? I didn't miss that as well. Yeah,
mic didn't
it should
turn
go on
but I
automatically.
just wanted to
Yes.
confirm that she said yes.
Yes, it has been.
Okay. So, Ms. Poulin, previously, you talked about being reasonably suspicious of the conduct of GC Strategies, that you were gathering evidence. Are there additional matters or additional files that you have transferred to the RCMP with respect to GC Strategies?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairperson. We have a number of reviews and administrative investigations underway. We take all the information that's provided to us seriously by the CBSA, the Auditor General's report, as well as the Ombudsperson's report. So we've analysed all of these files, and certain steps of the preliminary investigation are underway to validate the allegations that have been brought to our attention. As soon as we have adequate evidence to substantiate those allegations, and that's part and parcel of our process, then to transfer the information to the RCMP.
Have you at this point transferred any information to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police as a result of those reviews?
Donc, nous avons transféré
We've transferred the same file that the Deputy Minister just alluded to. So we shared our concerns with the RCMP as to the fact that a supplier was working on its own statement of work.
Suivant, next, it's Ms. Yip.